Hey everyone, are you able to hear me loud and clear? If yes, then please let me know on chat. Are you able to hear me? Okay, let's start now. Hey everyone, I welcome you all on behalf of. Just give me a minute. Okay. Mhm. Okay, so I welcome you all on behalf of my session that is on risk analysis. My name is Ajit Pal Singh Vadhavan. I am here. I will be presenting this session on risk assessment. What is risk analysis and what are the different phases of risk analysis? I will take you through that. Okay. So what is risk analysis? So risk analysis is basically a process of identifying, analyzing, and taking care of the risk. Okay, so hope you're able to see my slides also. So this is a session which will help you in your real world life or real life also, I would say, and corporate life also, and that can help you in your exams also if you want to preparing for if you are preparing for it. So my name is so this is a brief introduction about me. My name is Ajit Pal Singh Vadhavan. I have 20 years of experience in IS audit, SOC, leadership, security testing, compliance, risk management, regulations, and privacy. Okay. And same years of experience I have it in training also. Okay. So this session, as I already mentioned, is on risk management. I will be taking you through a complete life cycle of risk management in this. So let's start now. Just okay. So let's okay. So what I will take you through in this session, a speaker introduction. I have already given you that. Then I will also introduce what is risk, risk identification, then risk analysis method, risk response, risk monitoring, and wind up. So, what is risk? Risk is defined as the combination of, there are two factors which are very, very important when deciding upon the risk. That is likelihood of the vulnerability, a threat agent exploiting the vulnerability, and if threat agent exploits the vulnerability, what will be an impact of it? So it main purpose of risk management is to find out risk you have and to reduce the negative outcomes of it. Risk is also defined as impact or impact on the fulfillment of your objectives, negative impact on the fulfillment of your objectives. Like I want to pass CISSP. If there is a if here, and that is I would call as a risk. Risk is defined in terms of risk is defined in terms of impact and likelihood. Okay, risk is defined in terms of likelihood and impact. So let's take one example here. Okay, uh, like I I was having I normally for my classes, I use uh, what I call this as a audio gear that I'm wearing right now, that I'm using it right now. And prior to that, I was having the Jabra audio speaker, the Bluetooth speaker. And that was 2 years old. And there was another pen tab which I'm using for taking my class that was 1 year old. So I need to purchase means both were single point of failures. So I need, but only have around 30-40,000 rupees to purchase one. So how will I take a decision that which one should I purchase it? So I did a risk assessment, and what I did, I tell you, okay, what I did at that time. So this is my audio gear, okay, and this is my pen tab. So whenever you calculate the risk, it is being calculated in terms of likelihood into impact. So the audio gear was 2 years old. So I have to, so chances of going that down is, I would say, high. But at the same time, the impact was also very high. So risk is always defined as product of likelihood into impact. So risk was high in case of this one. At the same time, my pen tab, it was 1 year old. So impact will look means likelihood was medium. And if that goes down, it will not impact my class in a very negative manner. I could easily compensate that by speaking it. So impact is low. So risk, I would say, is kind of a low to medium. I will consider it as a low. So this was very high for me. So I immediately purchased another audio gear, which you can see it right now. So this is how you can do the risk analysis. So whenever you perform the risk analysis, always calculate in terms of likelihood into impact. I give you another example. Uh, One of my friends called me and he said, my position in my company is advertised. Advertised means your role is at risk. I said, okay, fine. Tell me what is the probability or likelihood that you will not get this role? He says medium. So likelihood is medium. Then I asked him, okay, because in my previous company, I won't name a company, you can see it on LinkedIn, means you will get N months of salary for spending N years in a company. So overall, that person, he has spent a lot in company. So overall, that person would have got a very good amount of money that that he can use it for business and all. So I said, fine, the impact is kind of medium. So he was panicking a lot. So I say, in this case, risk is medium because less likelihood into impact. So risk is medium. So I said, you are unnecessarily worrying about it. So in real world also, as I told you, in real world also, whenever you face some issues, always calculate the risk by using this scenario. It will really help you out. So what is risk? As I told you, risk is the probability of likelihood into impact. Impact means impact means what will be a impact, what will be a consequences if a risk is realized against an asset for risk is realized or threat exploits a vulnerability and what will be an likelihood of it. So these are the two factors which is very important for calculation of a risk, I would say. So risk analysis, I would say, risk management, it is a process of identifying. The first step is identifying. Then once you identify the risk, then you have to assess the risk. When I say assess the risk, find out the likelihood and impact. Like I found the risk that my audio gear will not work properly. It may go down as it is single point of failure. Then this is what I have identified it. Now I have to go one step ahead and find out the likelihood and impact of it. And then implement controls in order to reduce the risk at an acceptable level. Always remember, risk can never be eliminated completely. It will always be reduced to a certain level, and that is being defined by the top level management of an organization. So there are four steps as per ISO 27005, ISO 9000, ISO 27005, ISO 31000, or even if you look at NIST standards, there are four steps in risk management. One is risk identification, identify your risk, assess the risk, then respond to the risk, and then risk and control monitoring and reporting. So this is how the risk life cycle works. So let's look at one by one each steps. The first one is before we go for identification, you need to identify the assets that you have in the organization and give value to those assets. When we say value, we think about dollar values. But in real world, in corporate industries, whatever I have seen on the basis till in my 20 years careers, the value is normally given on the basis of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So it involves assessing the value of an organization asset and information to prioritize the security measures, manage risk, and ensure resource allocation. And if I say value, if I look, you can see it over here. Okay, you can see it over here. This is how you can identify the assets. You can. So, what was the first step? Identify the assets. You see, we have identified the assets like hardware, laptop, desktop systems, Windows servers, email servers. Similarly, we have networks, we have software, Windows 2008 R2 operating system, Cisco UCS software. Then similarly, we have informations like configuration and OS of virtual machines. So you see, this is how we can identify an asset and group an assets. And second step was give value to the asset. As I've already mentioned, when we talk about value, value is given or calculated in terms of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And this value, as a risk practitioner, I won't give it. It will be given by business owner, okay, business team. It's more like, look, they are the business people. We have to tell them the methodology. It's more like putting words in their mouth. But yes, we have to take the values from them. So you can see we have given the value to laptops, very low, high, medium. Okay. And what we have done in the background, this value has been mapped to numeric values like very low, 1, low, 2, medium, 3, high 4, very high 5. And then sum total of all, we have come up with some numeric value. So this gave us an asset value. Now we can also decide upon that find any asset which is having asset value of below 5, we won't consider it for risk assessment and treatment. So this is how asset and information valuation is being done. And sometimes what happens when we calculate the values, we only calculate it on the basis of total cost. Like for example, I take trainings. People say Ajit earn X amount of money per month. But at the same time, I do a lot of investments and I am investing and spending approx 20,000 every month on my upgradation and all that stuff. So that will also contribute to it. Like if I consider a firewall, the cost of firewall is, I would say, 2 lakh rupees, just an example. At the same time, you need people to run it, the salary of those people, 3 lakh. You need to provide training, that is 5 lakh. So total cost is 2 plus 2, 2 plus 3, 5 plus 5, 10 lakh. So these are some of the values which has been given here. Cost to acquire or develop the asset, cost to maintain, cost of intellectual property, cost to replace an asset, many other factors. This is just an absolute list. Depending on the kind of asset you are, you can pick up this. Then once the asset and information valuation is being done, then you will move towards risk identification. It is a process of identifying any risk that could prevent an organization from reaching its objective. But before you identify the risk, you need to identify the threats and vulnerabilities. So this risk identification, which helps you in understanding and planning the risk. So you can see it over here. Just I show you an example of it. Once you identify the assets, you have to identify the threats and vulnerabilities because risks exist because of threats and vulnerabilities. Without threats and vulnerability, risk can't exist. So you can see here, this is the laptop and desktop system. You have a vulnerability, absence of DLP, which can lead to a threat like data information leakage. Correct? Similarly, you see that can lead to a risk. In the absence of any DLP mechanism, the internet and email access may be used as a tool for data leakage. Similarly, you see vulnerability, absence of data encryption. Then, what is a threat? Data information disclosure. What is a risk? In the absence of HDD, the data stored in laptop may be at a risk of disclosure in case the device is lost or stolen. So there are two approaches to the risk identification. Normally, it's being asked in interviews also. So there are two approaches: risk identification means asset-based approach and event-based approach. Even event-based approach also comes down to your asset only. So the approach that I'm showing it to you right now, it is more of an asset-based approach. So you see, we have identified the asset laptop, and then on the basis of that, we are identifying the threats and vulnerability related to that. So this is what we called as an asset-based approach. In this, the risk scenarios are identified in terms of asset, threats, and vulnerabilities. So first, you need to identify the assets. Assets, as I already mentioned, there are two types of assets: tangible, which you can see like property, equipment, or data, or you have intangible, like intellectual properties, branding, reputations, etc. Then you have an event-based approach, where you identify the risk scenario, an event, like ransomware event has happened. So then you will identify the probability, likelihood, and then you will go for like finding out the like which assets it will impact. So you can see it over here. I show you. Mhm. Just a minute. So you can see it over here. So asset-based scenario, a financial service company identify a customer database as a critical asset. So asset is customer database, threat is unauthorized access, vulnerability is weak control, and then you have an outdated patches. Similarly, you have an event-based scenario. As I already mentioned, this is on the basis of some event, like ransomware attack on a competitor. Threat is malware propagating via phishing. And then you can see ultimately event-based is also comes down to a level of affected systems. So be it you pick up asset base or be it you pick up event base, because event will ultimately be impacting your assets only. So these are the ways, means these are the two methods which you can use it for asset, for risk identification. And there are other methods also, like brainstorming, where you call people from, means you call people who have a knowledge, and then you work together and then identify the risk. Then interviews, you can do interviews, You can give them questionnaires, OEM updates. Like I remember one time my boss called me that Cisco has released a CVSS level 10 vulnerabilities. So OEM has told us that vulnerability is being reported. So this is also one of the ways. Then regular vulnerability assessment, penetration testing, audits, that can also help you in finding out the risk. And subscription to blogs, like I have been a part of many blogs, and sometimes from blogs I came to know about the vulnerabilities. If I talk about the common methods, its brainstorming interviews are very, very commonly used risk identification method. But yes, OEM updates, regular testing, that can also be. But when you are performing a risk assessment for the first time, normally brainstorming and interviews method we use. So I would call it a brainstorm because I have been a part of 10, 15 risk assessment methods during my career. So I was a risk owner also, and even I worked in a role of auditor. So I would say brainstorming interviews are very commonly used, and when because and regular testings, OEM updates, that also can help you in finding out the risk over the period of time. But always remember, risk analysis is basically a periodic process. It's not a one-time activity. So risk analysis team. So you form a team, although you will see overwhelmed to see these many people: information security officer, risk manager, administrator, boner, etc. Fine, this looks good. This is, again, I tell you, this is more of an absolute list. Whenever practically I tell you that you will get one or two people. If you're lucky, you will get two people from the business and one or two people from your side: information security officer and risk manager. And again, as I told you, the values, threats, vulnerability, risk, you tell them the importance of it, tell them the meaning of it, but it is business owner who will be helping us in filling the gap, and providing us an input on the assets, because they are the assets. They are the owner of the asset. There is a database server. How can I tell the importance of the database server? I'm a trainer. I know the importance of my training data very well. The slides that I'm using, it's important to me, not to the other people around me. So the owner will decide that what will be the value, what will be the threats, vulnerabilities, what will be a likelihood and impact of it. So when I say risk analysis steps, first one is asset and information value assignment, then go for risk analysis and assessment, and countermeasure selections and implementation. So these are the three steps. So there are two types of, so we have seen asset valuation, we have seen risk identification. Now we are moving towards the next phase, which is your risk analysis. When I say risk analysis, finding out the likelihood and probability of it. This is more of a theoretical slide, because in real world, okay, in real world, it's mostly qualitative which is being used. What we do, we assign numeric value to the ratings. Like you see here, I show you one thing. Mm. You see here, these are what? Ratings you are seeing it. By looking at ratings, you will say it's qualitative, because in qualitative, we give ratings. But ratings will not help us in getting a, will not help you in taking an informed decision. That's the reason what we do, we assign numeric value to the rating. And this is what we call as a semi-quantitative. But ultimately, it's a qualitative only, which we are using in our day-to-day life. As far as my experience is concerned, I've never seen the quantitative one. And even if you read ISO 27005 standard document, they also suggest qualitative risk analysis. So from examination perspective, if you're preparing for exam, then quantitative, remember, it is applicable to tangible assets and it is objective in nature. Here we calculate risk in terms of dollar values. Qualitative, it is situation and scenario based, and it is applicable to intangible assets. And it here we give not rating, here we give ratings on the basis of discussions, brainstorming, etc. So quantitative risk analysis, again, you have to calculate the values. It provides a framework for organization to quantify the impact. Okay, so there are different values you should remember. I will take you through some mathematical calculation in a simplest manner, that what is what is asset value. Let's take an example. There is a data warehouse, and cost of that data warehouse is $200,000. So asset value is equal to $200,000, the total value. Okay. Then we have exposure factor. Percentage of loss the organization would suffer if a risk materialized. Like for example, my data warehouse got damaged. My data warehouse got damaged, and it reduces, and it a fire breaks out, and data warehouse got damaged, and it damages the warehouse by 40%. So exposure factor will be 40%. So which is like 40 divided by 100.4. What is SLE? It is like an impact we are calculating it. SLE stands for single loss expectancy. What is single loss expectancy? The loss in dollar if a risk is realized against an asset for one time. So it is a product of AV into EF. What is AV? $200,000 into EF zero point 0.4, it will be $80,000. So this is what we have calculated it. Okay. Now ARO. Whenever we calculate the risk, we always calculate the risk in terms of probability and impact. Impact we have calculated in terms of SLE. Now probability, and probability we calculate on in terms of yearly basis. So like probability of fire breaking out is once per 10 year. So ARO will be once per 10 year. So 1 divided by 10.1. Let's take some other example. If we say ARO is once per 100 year, so 1 divided by 100.01. If I say once per 200 year, it is 0.005. If I say once per 5 year, it is zero point 0.2. So this is how you calculate. Then comes ALE. ALE is yearly cost. So it is the product of SLE into ARO. What is SLE? We have calculated $80,000 into zero point 0.1. So the yearly cost is $8,000. So this is how you calculate the values in quantitative risk analysis. Park your 6 point for now. I will cover that in another 5 minutes. So this is how you can calculate the risk analysis, quantitative risk analysis. Another example, this slide have shown you all the steps in a more concise manner. So let's take another example. Let's take an example of a server. There is a server. Asset value of a server is $30,000. The server faced a DDoS attack, and due to which server is working at 60% of its efficiency, 70% of its efficiency. So 30% is exposure factor, that is 0.3. 30 divided by 100, 0.3. What is SLE? SLE is calculated as a product of AV into EF. What is 30,000 into EF? It will be $9,000. Okay. ARO, the probability of fire break, probability of your DDoS attack is once per 2 year. So ARO is equal to 1 divided by 2 is equal to 0.5. Then what is ALE? As I already mentioned, it is a product of SLE into ARO. So what is SLE? It is $9,000 into zero point 0.5 is equal to 4,500. So this is how you calculate the quantitative risk analysis. It's a concept. I've not seen it being used practically in the real world. The practical example I've already shown you in the form of that Excel sheet. In a practical world, We all use qualitative risk analysis. So another example of it, fire destroy a server with encrypted data. Consider the following situation. Asset value is $6,000. Exposure factor is 50%. So SLE is a product of asset value into exposure factor. So 6,000 into 50%, 3,000. And ALE is SLE into ARO, that is $300. So this is how you can calculate the value in quantitative. Always remember that quantitative is tangible, it's applicable to tangible assets, and it is dollar based. Value is calculated in terms of dollars. Qualitative risk analysis, it involves judgment, best practices, intuitions, and experiences. So Delphi brainstorming. Brainstorming is very, very commonly used. Delphi is a silent form of a brainstorming where you call experienced people and ask them to give the anonymous views, then checklists, surveys, questionnaires. Ultimately, you will reach this with the help of qualitative risk analysis. You will reach this stage where you will ask them, this is the kind of sheet that you will prepare with the help of qualitative risk analysis. Then you ask experts, what about the vulnerabilities? What is the data information leakage threat? And then you will also ask them about, okay, fine, this vulnerability is there, that DLP is not there, then it will lead to data information leakage. Then what is the likelihood and impact of it? You say, fine, the expert says, okay, two impact is two. So many people will give their values, will give their views, and then you will pick up the final values, and that will lead to this likelihood into impact. Then you will take asset value and then likelihood into impact. So asset value into likelihood into impact, you will come across this value of risk, which is 24. So I have been a part of many risk assessment processes. I have been a part of a lot of audits. In most of the organizations, you will find risk assessment being used. The values may differ, the ratings may differ, but all organizations, they do it like that. So first step, first is asset identification and gives the value. Okay, you come across this value. Then in the second phase, you will go for find out vulnerabilities and threats, then find out likelihood and impact related to that vulnerability, and then product of asset value into likelihood into impact, that will give you the risk value. Then risk, based on the risk value, you will take a decision that how to treat the risk, which is the next step, that is responding to the risk. So you can see these are the, like, as a result of qualitative risk analysis, you can come across, find out threat, probability impact, but you can see here we are seeing a ratings. And if you give this rating numeric values, it will become semi-quantitative. Lot my times I have seen people arguing with me saying that when they see numbers, they say, oh, this is quantitative. I said, no, this is not quantitative. This is qualitative, semi-quantitative, you can say it. It's ultimately qualitative where you have given the numbers to it. Now, depending on, although, because as I told you, the purpose of this session is to help you in preparing for exam, at the same time, practical exposure also. So if someone asks about what is tangible, what is quantitative, means if somewhat about what method you will use for tangible assets, you will say quantitative, and it is dollar based. And if someone talks about what method you will use for intangible assets, you will say qualitative. It is rating based. And if someone talks about you have both tangible and intangible asset, you will say I will use hybrid. In real world, we, be it tangible, be it intangible, we all use, most of the organization, on the basis of my exposure. I spent considerable time in industry. On the basis of my exposure, I would say mostly it is qualitative or semi-quantitative being used, where they get the ratings and then they have assigned the value to those ratings. Now, this is just a parameters on the basis of which they have done the comparisons. Like requires complex calculations. Quantitative, yes, you do the calculations. Qualitative, no. High degree of guesswork, qualitative, yes, quantitative, no. Provide credible cost benefit analysis. You can do it in quantitative, not qualitative. Provide opinion of the individuals who knows the process well, quantitative, no, qualitative, yes. And show clear cut losses, quantitative, yes, qualitative, no. Then, as I already mentioned, remember when I covered the quantitative risk analysis, I asked you to park the sixth point, that is cost benefit analysis. How will you do the cost benefit analysis? This is also we call as a return of investments. Like for example, I have done some training. That training costed me 1 lakh rupees. And on the basis of that training, I got a salary hike of 4 lakh rupees. So what is the profit that I earn? What is the benefit? Is it 4 lakh? No. I've invested 1 lakh into it. So 4 lakh minus 3 lakh, that is the amount, that is the benefit I've drawn out of the training. So similarly, when you implement the control, when you implement the control, you your ALE becomes down. Suppose let's take an example. How you calculate it, I show you to you. For example, you have calculated the risk. Risk is calculated in terms of ALE. You have said it's $10,000. This is the risk in its original form. This is we call as an inherent risk. This is before. Okay. Now you have implemented the control and this has been reduced to 2000. So you will say, I have saved $8,000. No, mate, you are not saved $8,000 because why are you losing? Why are you missing out the cost of that countermeasure? So this is $500. So formula here is ALE before minus ALE after minus cost. So it is $10,000 minus $2,000 minus $500. So it is 7,500. Ideally, when you are looking for return of investment, this value should be positive. Then only you should go ahead and implement the control. But sometimes what happens, even though the value is negative, you still have to go ahead and implement it because of regulations or any other issues. So this is about your phase two. Till now, we have seen risk identification. The second phase we have seen is risk analysis. So first we identify the risk, then we analyze the risk. Once we identify the risk, analyze the risk. Analysis of risk simply means that identification of threats, vulnerabilities, likelihood, and impact, and then calculate the risk value. And then on the basis of risk value, you will take a decision to respond to the risk. The third phase is about responding to the risk. So you may have multiple options in front of you in order to respond to the risk. They may have different cost. You may have it may you may have administrative measures. Like for example, there is a risk of password compromise. So you have an option of two-factor authentication. You have an option of security awareness training or increasing the password complexity. You will not take a decision. You will provide the proposals to the senior management, and management will take a decision whether to go ahead or not. So there are four ways of handling the risk. First one is risk mitigation, risk avoidance, risk transfer, and risk acceptance. So first one is risk mitigation. It is a process of developing strategies and action to reduce the likelihood of identified risk. This involves prioritizing risks based on their severity and implementing measures to control or minimize their adverse effect. Always remember, risk can never be implemented completely, can never be reduced completely. Because in real world also, you can't give 100% guarantee that okay, this thing will never happen. So implementing IPS and DLP, implementing web application firewall to address a shortcoming of network firewall. So these are some risk mitigation techniques. Then you have a risk avoidance. Just terminate the activity which give rise to a risk. Like for example, Panditji has said that you may die in a plane crash. Don't fly. You may not do good in business. Don't do business, do the job. So just terminating. So I'm doing a feasibility survey to start a business in some city. I did a feasibility survey and I find out it's not good, so I just terminate the activity which gave rise to your plan. I wanted to give remote access VPN facility in order to make them work remotely, but I find a lot of risk associated with it. No, don't go for it. So then risk transfer. When you transfer the risk to some other third party, like I'm having a house, there is a risk of earthquake in Delhi. I have taken an insurance. So what is that? I've transferred it. But remember, the accountability lies with you. So cyber insurance outsourcing that comes under transfer. Risk acceptance. When cost of control is more than cost of asset. Let's take an example. I used to work for BT. So SOC third line and SOC third line India and SOC second line was under me. So SOC third line was working in a follow the sun model, US, UK, India. So we were providing support on weekends on a call out support. So one day, UK people said, we can't provide you support on weekends. Fine. So we highlighted this as a high risk to our management. Management said, fine. They asked us to come in meeting. Then they asked me, Ajit, what is the cost of the risk? What is the cost of risk if we don't have engineers? I said 40,000 pounds. Fine. Then they asked what will be the cost of engineers if I need to put them in shift? I said 200,000 pounds. The cost of one engineer in UK is 100,000 pounds. L3 engineer. They said fine, we accept the risk because we can't spend for $200,000 just to handle the risk of 40,000 pounds. Fine, this is a condition. Under normal conditions, this is the actions any normal person will take. But same condition arises in UK in Rolls-Royce support. Same cost, number of tickets were less, but there they have to hire engineer because they have a contractual requirements. So in real world, things are not black and white. Nothing is binary, I would say. So same here in risk world also, we have to take an actions. Then residual risk. Always remember, I have already mentioned that risk can never be eliminated completely. It will reduce to a certain extent, and that is being defined by top level management of an organization. So, what is inherent risk? The risk in its original form. And once you implement the control, risk will be reduced. And as I already mentioned, that risk can never be eliminated completely. So that is what. So whatever the leftover risk is called residual risk. And that decision will be taken by management. And anything which happens after that residual risk, after accepting the residual risk, is the responsibility of a top level management. So what is risk capacity? It is a maximum risk an organization can afford to take. Like I earn 1 lakh rupees. So my risk capacity is 1 lakh. Risk appetite. Out of that 1 lakh, I can invest 50,000 in share market. So my risk appetite is 50,000. If a share market is bad or in a bear run, I can go for another 20,000. So that is my risk tolerance. Under no circumstances, your risk tolerance and risk appetite should be greater than risk capacity. I earn 1 lakh and I invest 2 lakh in the share market. No, sometimes risk tolerance can be either equal to or greater than appetite. So, like I said, okay, if 50,000 is a limit for me, I can't go beyond that. So that is we called as risk appetite. Risk tolerance can be greater than or equal than appetite. And risk appetite should generally be within the risk capacity of an organization. In no in no case it should exceed the risk capacity. Then what is aggregated risk? Aggregated risk, like risk combined together become a bigger risk. Like two people are on leave, no worries, out of 10. But 5 people on leave, aggregated risk become very high. Cascading risk, when one failure leads to the chain reaction of failures, and more relevant when you are using a closely knitted product. Then on the basis of, look, in our response phase, we implement controls. Controls are of different types and controls are applied on the basis of risk assessment. Like when you go to doctor will ask you about your problems, and when you tell him your problems, then on the basis of problems he will give you medicines. So controls can be categorized on the basis of implementation and on the basis of functionality. On the basis of implementation, it is administrative, known as the soft controls, as they're more management oriented, like policies, procedures, risk management procedures. Then you have technical controls, also known as like encryption, access controls, identification, that all comes under technical controls. Then you have a physical controls, which is put into place to protect the facility, locks, fences, security guard, dogs, that all comes under physical controls, the physical controls. Then control based on functionality, deterrent, which can deter a potential attacker, like warning banner, preventative, which is intended to avoid an incident from occurring, firewall, intrusion prevention system, corrective control, which is intended to correct an action after an incident has occurred. I would say using fire extinguisher to douse a fire or patch management to mitigate the vulnerability. Recovery, which is intended to bring the environment back to the regular operation, BCP, DR. Detective controls, which help an incident activity and potentially an intruder. And ultimately compensative, when your primary control is not working, you will compensate that with a secondary control. So one control can belongs to two categories on the basis of implementation, on the basis of implementation, and on the basis of functionality. Okay. So like firewall is a preventive control and technical control. Firewall is a preventive and technical control. But it will not, there is not a hard casting on a stone that firewall will always remain a preventive and technical control. Like technical bis, look, the implementation category will always remain fixed, but functionality changes. Like I see a firewall and I decided not to go ahead. So here the firewall has acted as a deterrent control. Similarly, a security guard, which is a physical and preventive control. But if I see a security guard and decided not to go ahead, in that case, security guard had acted as a deterrent control and physical control. Similarly, CCTV, which is a detective and physical. But if I see a CCTV and I decided not to go ahead, in that case, it had acted as a deterrent control. So this is your third phase, that is risk response. So first you identify it, analyze it, and then respond to it. So you see here, I just show you. So the risk treatment. So like on the basis of risk assessment, this value we got 24, 24, 30, correct? So we have a risk management procedure in place. So in that, we have a procedure which mentioned that any risk which is below 25 is considered as low, and we will accept that risk. So you see, now we'll move towards the next phase. Like you see, this was the one which was considered low. So we have accepted that risk, accept and review annually. And at the same time, you see, if you see manage means you will handle that risk, and there are four options available for you: accept, avoid, reduce, transfer. So most of the organizations, they use risk assessments in this manner only. So now the fourth phase. So this is the sheet that I've showcased it to you. That is a risk register. Once the risk assessment is completed, you will share this risk sheet, risk register, with a risk owner, the business head of that department, and they will accept it. Once they accept it, it will be put into production, and we will be regularly monitor that. So risk environment is dynamic. It should not be a one-time activity, because the environment in which we are working is changing regularly. If I talk about 5 years ago, the risk related to deepfakes were not very high, but these days it is very prominent. Pick up any big actor, you will find things related to videos related to deepfakes in the market. So organizations should continuously monitor the IT risk and control to ensure the effectiveness of the IT risk management. So normally the complete exercise should be done once in a year, but review should be done every quarterly. So as an auditor, I used to check Whenever I used to audit your risk management functions, I do check that how frequently they are reviewing the risk assessment. So normally, organizations have risk forums. The business people and senior management should definitely be part of that. So risk register. So as a part of once a risk assessment is complete, you will move towards a risk. You will create a risk register that I've showcased it to you. That was a kind of a risk register. Our risk register is a tool which is used to document and track the risk throughout the life of a project or within the organization. It is typically includes information about the identified risk, their potential impact, risk ratings, and mitigation strategies. So these are the components of risk register: risk ID, that alphanumeric ID, the description of a risk, current status of a risk, that is, it is under threshold, above threshold, the KRIs, the risk owners, risk thresholds. So you can see this is a very simple example of your risk register. Data breach, you see the risk ID is given, data breach, financial loss. Owner is IT department. This is wrong. Owner should be a role rather than a department. How can you make whole department responsible for it? No. Threshold, it's under, and you can have a plan to implement two-factor authentication. Although organizations, they do have processes in place to communicate communicate about the risk to the management in a regular manner. But sometimes what happens, you can't wait for that duration to come. Like, for example, you have just completed send a communication. Within 2 days, Cisco has released a CVSS level 10 vulnerability. Now you can't wait for another month. You have to immediately send. So for that also, the process needs to be set up, maybe an email communication, or if it is very significant, then you can set up a call and tell them the importance of it. Then risk communication, it is a way to, it is a key to factor because look, communication is a key to everything. I believe in there is one ad called Tata Sky. If you have seen it, that there is a company called Tata Sky. They had one ad, "बोलने में क्या जाता है." Okay, so speak. You have to. Communication is a key. I've seen in a lot of calls. I was in a SOC, I was part of a lot of calls. People were doing things. They were doing things properly, but they were not communicating. So communication is very important and it is important in terms of risk management also. So you should have a regular process set up to communicate about the risk to the senior management and the stakeholders. You can't expect senior management to be in every calls. So normally what happens, we set up risk management forums, security forums to communicate to the risk about the risk to the normal stakeholders. And we can have a setup communication forum setups like management forum where you can it's not very frequent, 6 months to 1 year, where you can discuss the risk with the management. There is a saying that if you can't measure, then you can't improve. So KPIs and KRIs, if you can't measure, you can't control. So you should have a process in place to measure the risk. KRI, how risky an activity is, like rate of security incident. A sudden increase in security incident could increase a growing risk of cyber attack. Like, for example, 80%, 90% of engineers are trained. 1 week you find out, 1 month you find out it has been reduced to 70%. So this is a risk. KPI is a performance indicator, like how well your process is doing. Means how many process risk management process has been completed, how many systems has been patched. Correct. So that is what about risk measurement. And another method of risk measurement is your, okay, we have a CMM levels. Like this is to measure the level of risk management process in the organization. Like we have initial. Initial means you don't have any risk management process in place. Managed, you have a risk management process. You don't, even now also you don't have a risk management, but you have attained some consistency in the way you are managing your risk. Then defined, where you have a well-defined risk management process. Quantitative management, you're not only following a risk management process, but also measuring it and then optimizing on the basis of measurement you are taking measures to improve upon it. So this is about risk maturity model. There are many risk frameworks available. I would say I've not seen a lot of organization following NIST and ISOs are very, very common, but mostly what I have seen in ISO 27001 also, they have the controls implement, they have controls for risk assessment and mostly organizations follow that. But if you really want to follow ISO 31000 is good. ISO 21000, 27005 is also the one. In US, it's NIST. Depending on your organizations, you can pick it up. But as I tell you, whichever you pick it up, it's these four phases: risk identification, risk analysis, risk analysis and assessment, risk response, and risk monitoring. So this is about your risk assessment. Okay, so this will help you in your day-to-day job also. At the same time, if you're preparing for your exams like CSSP, CISA, CISM, any InfoSec exam, CompTIA Security Plus, that will also help you in that. Okay, so any questions from your side, feel free to ask. Otherwise, I would close the session. Any questions, anyone? Any questions? Okay, I don't see any questions. So thank you very much. See you in my next session. So I will tell you about my next session in coming week. So thank you very much, mate. Thanks for joining it. Thanks.